Good evening. So tonight I'm going to spend a little bit of time laying a foundation. I'm going to talk about how many cruise ships travel to the States and to Charleston, how much food and fuel they consume, how much waste they discharge, what's in that waste and why it can be harmful. And then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the existing regulatory framework that governs cruise ship discharges. So this is a rendering of a neighborhood on Oasis of the Seas. Many of you may have heard of Oasis of the Seas. It's a very large cruise ship that can carry 8,500 passengers and crew. I put this up there to give you an idea of just how large some of these ships can be and how they really are like floating cities. Oasis in particular has 7 neighborhoods, 4,100 toilets, and they serve 35,000 meals a day. That's a picture of it right there. As you can see, it's a massive ship. What that means is when you feed one of these ships, you're feeding a city. This is a screenshot from Royal Caribbean's website, which, as you can see, they describe provisioning the ship as feeding a city at sea. So what goes into these ships? These are the figures for an average cruise ship. So this would just be about a 3,000 passenger cruise ship. See 12,000 pounds of beef, 7,500 pounds of seafood, 10,000 pounds of fresh fruit, 48,000 eggs. And that's the food. As far as fuel is concerned, one of these ships can burn between 55,000 and over 100,000 gallons of bunker fuel per day. Bunker fuel is literally the bottom of the barrel. It's an extremely dirty fuel that is left over after the refining process. So what comes out? When you put in all that food, it has to go somewhere. Same size cruise ship will discharge about 210,000 gallons of human sewage in 1 week. 1 million gallons of gray water, which is water from sinks and galleys and showers. 25,000 gallons of oily bilge water. And I don't know, for those of you who aren't familiar, that is water that's in the bilge of a ship that can be left over when you have machine cleaning processes that involve oil and lubrication. And up to 11,500, over 11,500 gallons of sewage sludge. Sewage sludge is the byproduct of the sewage refining process. Now that's water pollution. As far as air is concerned, cruise ship emissions contain particulate matter, sulfur oxides, nitrogen oxides. A single ship in port, in a 10-hour port call, can emit more exhaust-containing particulate matter than 12,400 cars. Why so much? Well, they're very large, they have a lot of lights, a lot of facilities, a lot of amenities on board, and they're burning very dirty fuel. As to the impacts of air pollution, Dr. Reed is going to touch on that a little bit later. So those are the figures for a single ship. Well, how many ships are we talking about? So between 2007 and 2008, more than 20 million people took cruises from a North American port. In the first half of 2009, just under 5 million people took cruises from a North American port. And it's North American because it includes Vancouver, Canada. Cruise ships that travel up to Alaska tend to start in Washington State, stop off in Vancouver, Canada, and then head up to Alaska in order to avoid the Jones Act, which I won't get into in this initial presentation. As far as Charleston is concerned, Charleston had 33 cruise ships in 2009 and is expecting 69 in 2010. That's a lot of people and a lot of waste being discharged. This is a picture of a cruise ship in Venice, and I put that up because Venice is another historic city with historic architecture, and you can see what it looks like when one of these ships pulls up. So, what's in these discharges that they're putting out? Sewage and gray water. So, sewage and gray water contain bacteria, viruses, as everyone knows, intestinal parasites, pharmaceuticals, nutrients, detergents, oil, etc. Issues, contamination of the food supply, ingestion by beachgoers, water sport enthusiasts is a big problem. Viruses are an interesting issue because even with advanced treatment, there is some concern that viruses can persist in the sewage, and this has an impact on shellfish beds. In Washington State, the Department of Health did a study on virus discharges from cruise ships, and they ended up banning the discharge of cruise ship sewage within a half mile of shellfish beds. So, oily bilge water, hazardous waste, again, you have oil byproducts, detergents, it can bioaccumulate in the food supply. Hazardous waste, you might ask, well, what kind of hazardous waste would you have on board a cruise ship? Well, there are batteries, fluorescent light bulbs, paint, chemicals that are used to clean the ship, photo processing chemicals. All of this can be harmful to human health and the aquatic environment. Sewage sludge presents similar problems as sewage, except it's much more highly concentrated. And then incinerator ash, cruise ships incinerate about 75 to 85% of the trash on board the ships. So they incinerate cardboard, paper, plastic, and dewatered food waste. The watery portion of the food ends up in their gray water stream. So the next question then becomes, well, where can they dump all of this? What are they legally allowed to do? So there's an overarching framework of international and federal regulations that dovetail, if you will, because federal regulations implement the international law. And those regulations govern the majority of the United States and Charleston. Some states have their own laws, Alaska, California, Maine, and Hawaii, for example. Although Hawaii at one time also had a memorandum of understanding, which was actually much stronger than the law that they have. So, international law. Now, I know there's a lot of text up there. Essentially, ship pollution is dealt with on an international level by the International Maritime Organization. The actual law is called it's the Convention to Prevent Pollution from Ships, or MARPOL for short. I'm not sure how they get that acronym from that, but that's okay. MARPOL has 6 annexes, and the United States has ratified 5 of them. Cruise ships in general are flagged in Panama and Liberia, and Panama and Liberia have ratified all 6 annexes. That matters because if you have ratified one of these annexes, you're required to comply with the annex, unless you go to a jurisdiction that has not ratified the annex. And that's relevant for Annex 4, because the United States has not ratified Annex 4, which governs sewage. So that means when one of these cruise ships travels to the U.S., they only have to comply with the Clean Water Act. And I will get to what the Clean Water Act says as we move on. The other relevant annex for our purposes is Annex 6. Annex 6 governs ship air emissions. So Annex 6 was actually just amended last Friday to create a North American Emission Control Area, which is basically a protective zone in which ships have to, of course, comply with more stringent standards. It will save thousands of lives and billions of dollars in health costs in the United States. And Dr. Reed, I believe, will be talking more about the benefits of this reduction. But essentially, it's going to reduce the sulfur content and the nitrogen content and the particulate matter content of the fuel they use. And there are various ways that they can comply with it. So, federal law. And I think I can do this by showing you a map, but let's start with sewage. So that little line, and you can see the sort of green, I don't know if you can see the, oh, oops, let's see here, the pointer. There we go. You can see that. That represents 3 nautical miles, and you can see Charleston right there. Out to 3 nautical miles, cruise ships have to treat their sewage using a Coast Guard certified marine sanitation device. That's what's required under the Clean Water Act. Now, the standards in the Clean Water Act have not been updated since 1976, and technology has advanced significantly since then. So that's one thing to keep note of, that even though they're required to treat it, the standards are minimal. And not only that, but there is no monitoring or reporting requirement. So nobody is checking up on them on a regular basis. They're not required to report the content of their sewage on a regular basis. When EPA performed testing of sewage discharges in 2000,